he was not a nice person, let's just say that. And one thing that I think Opus Dei tries really hard not to highlight and not to talk about in Russia is about his connections to the fascist regime in Spain. Because Russia still, and most of the former Soviet Union countries, we think, hold a lot of generational trauma from World War II. Every family in both Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and other former Soviet countries has relatives who died during World War II. So, for example, from my mother's side, every male relative of my grandmother died during World War II. And the same goes for my father's side. So his mother lost all of her brothers during World War II. So, of course, you grow up hating the Nazis, hating fascism. And when you suddenly learn that the father, this holy figure, was kind of on really good terms with Spanish fascists, it is problematic. So they really tried, well, I wouldn't say to keep it secret, because it's impossible to keep it secret, right? But not to highlight it or put an accent to that. So they always argued and presented that fact when I started asking them, "Oh, could you tell me more about this period in the life of Josemaría Escrivá? This is so weird that he was, maybe not supportive of the Franco's regime, but definitely not doing anything to oppose it." And they were always presenting it, it just was difficult times for to live in Spain. You had the alternative was either that or communism. And he just, he didn't want to exclude anyone. So, of course, and then he left Spain, so he was forced to leave. So they kind of presented him almost as a martyr of Franco's regime, which is, I think, not accurate to say the least. But they tried to spin this story in that way, that he was actually a victim, that he was not supporting the fascist regime in any way. So I just put it on a shelf. I did not question that for quite a long time, until we had a conversation with the Opus Dei priest about my political views. So we had upcoming elections, I think in 2012 or 2013, if I'm not mistaken. And this is also was when I realized that the conversations with your spiritual directors, so with both supernumerary and numerary, who were having the circle with me, right, that the contents of those conversations are not secret, and not only are not the conversations with supernumeraries and numeraries not secret, but also your confessions to the Opus Dei priest. So I started to become suspicious that the things that I share with the priests, with the Opus Dei priest, are being shared to my spiritual directors. And the same kind of happened for my ex-husband. We soon realized that the stuff that he said during his spiritual direction and his confessions kind of traveled to the female center and vice versa. So that was very worrying for me. That was a huge piece of, I don't know, books or like items that I had to put on a shelf before I actually had a proof that that was actually happening. And so I casually mentioned in one of the spiritual, in either one of the circles or one of the conversations with either the numerary or supernumerary, I don't remember correctly, that I was going to vote for a left-wing party. So back then we had like the main Communist Party, which is, I mean, they are tankies basically. So they have pro-Stalin and Stalinist views, and I never shared those views. I was always, I would say, culturally Marxist in my political views. And I shared that I was going to vote for a left-wing party. I don't remember how they were called back then. They definitely no longer exist, especially now during Putin's regime. So I casually mentioned that, and then it was brought up by the Opus Dei priest in our confession. He basically told me that I'm not allowed to vote that way, that all communists and people with left-leaning views should be excommunicated by the church, and so on. And I was shocked because it was during confession. I realized that it is very suspicious that he asked that question. Like, how did he find out about that? And I asked him, I remember I asked him directly, like, what are your views then on fascism? And he said something along the lines that, they probably had some points if if they came to power, especially during that time in Europe. They had a very strong social politics and agenda, and so they had some valid points. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, no, I'm not going to excuse fascism. And so we had our confession kind of turned into this political dispute. I don't remember how, but somehow I talked myself out of being excommunicated for sure. And he had his usual read like Hail Mary for 10 times and so on. So we laughed at that, kind of agreed to disagree, and he kind of twisted it in a way that I'm just, I have this, probably my views are affected by Soviet history and by the way I was raised, because my dad was very left-leaning in his views back then. So we kind of left it at that, but it definitely added a lot of weight to the shelf, let's call it that, of me doubting a lot. And so I started to Google and look for more materials about alternative sources and alternative materials about Opus Dei. Before that, I don't know if you remember that movie that came out around 2012, I think, or 2013, with Olga Kurylenko and what's his name? The guy who played Daredevil, like a biopic of Josemaría Escrivá. It was such a cheesy movie, I remember. And we watched it, of course, collectively. We gathered in the center. We had like a proper movie viewing experience. Prior to that, we only viewed like public speakings of Josemaría Escrivá, like his public speeches in, I think, in Chile or in some other country. So we had movie nights. And that was the first like proper movie night. So it was an actual movie. So we watched that movie, and I just remember how the girls were super, super excited about everything, and they loved it. I'm a movie buff, so I was like, that's a very crappy movie. So I started looking for like alternative materials, and this is when I came upon the book. I think it's called Beyond or Behind the Threshold by Maria Carmen de Tapia. And I remember it was so weird that I couldn't find it anywhere. Well, first of all, you need to remember that, of course, I had to look for it in English, and I don't speak Spanish. And back then, Amazon did not ship to Russia. I mean, of course, it no longer does because of the war. But back then, like, you couldn't order from Amazon. And I don't think they had any new copies. So that was very puzzling for me, like that I could not locate any newly, freshly printed copies of this book. And so I remember ordering it secondhand from Better World Books or some other secondhand bookshop. And it arrived in a couple of weeks to me, and I started reading it. And that was such an eye-opening, I think, experience, just reading about the things that I started to learn more back then, because this is when they also started to tell you about more traditions, more rules that kind of hinting that, for example, you are not contributing enough money, you're not donating enough money. Of course, they're not going to say anything like very directly, like you're not bringing enough money, right? But it will be in those very covert ways, like Opus Dei should be treated as your third child. Just think of it as your third child. So you need to buy some clothes, you need to buy food for your third child. So this is how much you should contribute. And when you start to complain, for example, like, okay, we're struggling financially right now. We just had a second baby. My husband lost his job and has just started his new job. Like, we cannot contribute a lot of money. They will always, of course, quote Josemaría Escrivá's famous quote that every new baby is like a loaf of bread. So, like, if you trace that logic, Opus Dei is your third child, and every new baby it comes with a loaf of bread. I think that's the quote. So, like, money will come from somewhere else, and you will be provided for. You just need to trust Opus Dei and try to donate more money. So I started kind of, I think, linking what I have read in that book with the stuff that we were experiencing at that moment, especially. So for my ex-husband, he was complaining a lot about the way men were infantilized in the male center, that they were not doing anything, and that he once tried to help the assistant numerary with some cleaning chores, and she got really scared, almost scared from that, and he thought it was really weird because, I mean, even though we're divorced, we always had a very equal marriage in terms of splitting our house chores. So both my ex-husband and I, we would do like about 50% of everything in terms of childcare and taking care of our home, cooking, and so on. So he was very conflicted with that, and he started kind of complaining to me about that. And I never thought about it because I think, and I've learned about it many years after that, after reading about the assistant numerary experiences in Spain and other Catholic dominant countries, that what we have seen and what is happening in countries like Spain, Portugal, and so on is quite different because I think Russia is such it's a small countries in terms of converts to Catholic Church and to Opus Dei. So, for example, in our center, in the women's center, assistant numeraries were also working part-time outside of the centers. I haven't heard that happening anywhere else in the world. But what happened, I think, was that they soon learned that the male center is not doing well financially. They were just not bringing money, to say the least, while the women were actually making a lot of money from giving the language lessons. And the assistant numerary who was at the center when we started attending it, I think she was from Portugal. So they soon realized that she will bring more money if she teaches Portuguese or tutors in Portuguese in Moscow. And that what happened. So soon, I think 6 or 7 months after we've joined, she kind of started to have this side hustles, those gig jobs outside of the center, which is, I think, quite unique for Opus Dei centers. So they were in a little bit of a pickle. So she was the only assistant numerary back then, both for the female and for the male centers. So they had to find some more assistant numeraries. And this is when they brought a lot of young girls from Ukraine. They had at least 2 teenage girls from Western Ukraine. So there were 3 Ukrainian numeraries in total in Moscow back then. One was from, I think, very well-educated, high socioeconomical status family so she was bilingual in both Russian and Ukrainian, and she soon started teaching like capsule wardrobe, grooming classes, how to have a perfect feminine style and something like that in Moscow. Well, the other 2 girls, they were definitely like from very poor Western Ukrainian families, so they only spoke Ukrainian. And they kind of started to help out that assistant numerary lady so she could give the language lessons outside. And so my husband was the first one to kind of bring out that job disparity. This poor lady, not only was she cleaning for both the male and female centers, kind of hiding in the male center, which was shocking to my husband. He didn't know back then that that was actually quite common practice for Opus Dei centers. So yeah, and also working almost full time outside of the center as a language teacher and language tutor. She even opened a small business providing catering classes in Portuguese and in Spanish. So she soon started actually bringing a lot of extra money compared to the male center. So that was very interesting just to see her trying to keep up with everything, with all the side hustles, but at the same time maintaining that role of assistant numerary. I remember her just having super dark eye circles. She was so tired. It was obviously that she was overworked, and I was very worried about her because she was such a nice person. So I tried to bring it up in the conversations with the ladies, like, I think she's tired. And now I probably didn't help her with my comments like that. But that also, once again, added to the shelf, and I started to compare this experience with the stuff that I read in Del Tapia's book. And then I started, of course, looking into the comments on that Odan webpage, kind of with this new knowledge. This was also simultaneously when I encountered that list of cult-like features, like what features every cult has. And when I remember reading that list, it's like ticking every box, like Opus Dei ticked every box, from having like a cult-like figure, because even in the beginning, I was sometimes very questioning, and for me, it was very confusing why we are addressing him as capital F Father, and to me, it was very confusing. And obviously, like, we're having this almost cult-like figure. Why are we doing that? And of course, when I try to bring it up, like, why are we calling him father? Aren't we supposed to have only one? So that was never addressed properly. And then also at that time, they started giving me I don't know what's it called in English, the book with all the rules, that you're supposed to only read inside the center and never take it back home with you. And to me, it just screamed cult-like behavior. So are you seriously telling me that you have this book with all these rules that you're not supposed to read until you reach a certain stage of being a supernumerary, and you cannot take it outside, you cannot like take a photo or anything? And it was also in English, like they didn't have a translated version to Russian. So that was very puzzling, and to me it was, I think, the one of the major red flags that I kept on adding on the shelf of my doubts. So I remember the exact moment when I decided it's time to leave. So returning back on what I have already told you, I had my doubts because of the political views and the connections of Josemaría Escrivá to the fascist regime. So that was a major issue for me that was not resolved and was not properly addressed by Opus Dei in any way. Then the gender issues, the way I felt women were overworked compared to men who were very infantilized and not doing anything. That was a huge issue, both for me and my ex-husband. So that was also there on the shelf. Then that book and the memoirs about Josemaría Escrivá that portrayed him as honestly like not a pleasant person. and I also remember I started watching his public speakings only after I joined Opus Dei, only after I whistled. I think if I have watched any of those videos before, I would have probably more doubt, because he just didn't give me an impression of a pleasant person. So that was also there on the shelf. But the last, I think, item that broke the shelf was the retreat. So I went to the retreat, the weekly retreat in the center, with my son. He was 3 months back then. I was obviously very tired, didn't have enough of sleep, sleep deprived. And it was just logistically so hard to go to the mass every day and to be physically and spiritually present during every circle and every moment that week, while also trying to be a good mother to my 3-month baby. And there were other women with their babies. So we didn't have any, childcare or anything. You were supposed to sit there with your baby. And at that moment, I think there were 3 of us with babies. So there were 2 other girls who had, one kid was maybe 6 months old, and another one was like a newborn baby. Like there was this girl who had a baby who was maybe like 3 or 4 weeks old. So you can imagine just the sensory overwhelming, the overload that you have from like 3 screaming babies during the mass or like during the circle while you're trying to concentrate. So it was so emotionally and physically draining. And every time I wanted like to call my husband, I could not, because like everything was so strict in terms of time. You were not supposed to waste any minute, like even to the point like when you would think like, do I have time to actually go to the toilet? Like everything, the schedule was so packed and so extreme that I remember sitting at the mass and remembering that I hadn't peed for maybe 6 hours, and like my bladder is about to burst. And when I wanted like to call my husband, and not to complain, but just to share how hard it was, especially since back then we were pretty much in love, and we still had a very, very good relationship. So he was very, very worried about me. And I was also worried about him and our oldest kid, because our oldest kid was like 4 or 5 back then. So I also wanted to know, to speak to her, to ask her how's it going, how's everything. And I remember I couldn't do this alone, because they were always there. They were always like monitoring what you were doing. It felt like I'm watching a movie about a cult, especially after reading that Maria del Tapia's book, and after reading all the testimonies and all those materials about cults and cult-like behavior. I felt like, oh my God, I'm in a cult. Like that was the feeling, like on one of the final days, that I am in a cult. So when I returned, I think the next day, I told my husband that I'm not going there anymore. I'm done. And to my surprise, he actually agreed with me almost immediately, because he was also having a lot of doubts back then, based on other, I think, grounds and reasons. I feel like from the male perspective, from the male side, they were really pushing him into becoming like this perfect cookie cutter sole breadwinner, and they were constantly blaming him for not earning more money. And then that also kind of was also thrown back to me in a way that I am not being a supportive wife, because I should take over all the household responsibilities. So he has more time to kind of look for a better job, to maybe find a second job, but basically to earn more money. So he was at that point, I think, very tired and started to have his doubts, because he was experiencing a lot of pressure into earning more money and becoming this perfect breadwinner. So we had this conversation, and we decided to stop going to Opus Dei, and kind of to inform them that we are leaving. I think it took us maybe another 5 or 6 months to actually put it into action, because once again, people are so nice. Everybody's so nice to you. It felt like you are losing a friend, that you're doing something wrong if you have to stop going there. But so it was really difficult time for us to actually, I guess, proceed from that decision that, this doesn't work for us. It's a very cult-like, shady organization, to actually stop going. And at that time, so I didn't mention that our second child is disabled. And at that time, it became clear that there is also something wrong with our second child. So I started to spend a lot of time kind of going to doctors, to seeking medical expertise to figure out what's wrong with our second child. And that was happening at the same time when we were in the process of leaving Opus Dei. And so in the end, they took it very well. So nobody tried to stop us or tell us, no, I mean, why you're leaving us? No, we're so good. You should try to do better or anything. Because at this time, it became clear that our second child is disabled, and they could also see that I no longer can attend a daily mass. I could no longer do all the daily norms or weekly norms that were required from me. And I started to share a lot that, I'm having this crisis with my son. We're dealing with a lot of issues. And back then, I didn't know that in general, Opus Dei, like I've never seen disabled people in Opus Dei, let's be honest, or elderly people. To be fair, I have never seen anybody who's older than 60 in Opus Dei. So to me, it looked like they did not want anybody like with a family member who is disabled to be part of Opus Dei. So they were quite okay to let us go at that point. They never did anything to prevent us from leaving, unlike major cults, right? So especially once we got my son's diagnosis and I shared it with them, they were actually quite supportive. And I mean, my spiritual director told me that I understand this is more important to you, like you need to take care of your son. So maybe you can just continue to be like, attend our masses or attend our center, whatever you can as a helper, maybe. But generally, they agreed that we are not cut out to be supernumeraries. So I think in the end, it was a combination why they let us go without any persecution or anything, is because we were not contributing financially enough, for sure, back then. And because we had a disabled member of the family who took a lot of time, of free time, and of course, both physical and emotional labor. So they knew they could no longer stay this third child, that a lot of attention is being given elsewhere or to another person, to our son. So I think that was the reason why they were quite okay with letting us go and with cutting the ties. So everything was amicable when it comes to us leaving Opus Dei. The only thing that puzzled us was that when we whistled, we received a letter from the prelate back then. I don't remember who was the prelate back then, but he wrote a letter, actually handwritten letter, and that was such a celebration in the center. As I understand it, it's a very rare occasion when you actually receive a reply. Usually you write the letters to the prelate, but we actually got a reply when we whistled. And I remember both women and men gathered in one center for us to read the letter aloud. It was such a huge event. So when we stopped being supernumeraries, the only thing they asked us to do is to return that letter. And we didn't. I don't know. I just thought, like, that's my letter. I can keep it. I'm not going to return it to you. So I lied and told them that, we lost it. We no longer have it. But I think I still have it somewhere, probably in Moscow, somewhere. So that was the only thing that they've asked us to do. And then, of course, maybe once a year, they will contact you and just, ask, how is everything? Where are you? How's it going? I remember when we moved to the country where I am currently, they found out about it somehow, and they reached out and asked my husband back then, do you want us to give you a contact of the Opus Dei Center there? Maybe like they will help you out. They can help you out with like navigating the country, the system. And we said no. But they continue. Well, they stopped reaching out to me because I think they know that I'm no longer religious. But they definitely continue to reach out to my husband every year. And I guess it helped because I know that he continues to attend the center in Russia because he's back to Russia and he returned there about 2 years ago. So that was our experience. It's not, I think it was not as traumatic and emotional as some people who have spent decades or who have their whole families in Opus Dei. We just were there for 2 years. I don't think we were traumatized to a great extent, but at the same time, I cannot let go of that experience. It definitely affected me. after Opus Dei, I was diagnosed with OCD, and my experience in the female center definitely has influenced my cleaning standards, the way I organize my home still to this day. Like, every time I clean, for example, my bathroom, I will do the toilet paper triangle as it used to be in the center. So it's those small, stupid things, I think, that get into your brain and you become almost indoctrinated in certain routines that you no longer think about their origin. And then once you think about, why am I doing this? Why am I so obsessed about like bad linens or doing this or that? I can always trace it back to my time at Opus Dei, because through this soft love and soft power, they always were able to make you do this insane amount of norms, of rules, of daily routines that no normal person, I think, who's outside of Opus Dei or who's not into catering or like housekeeping, who's not in the hotel business, no other person would do that. But I still, for some reason, continue to do that. So in that way, I think I can definitely feel their influence in me to a certain degree. Yeah. I think that's it.